guys, welcome back to a brand new episode of the So Cultured podcast. We want to start off today's episode with a little disclaimer because I low-key feel like if you're watching on YouTube or you're watching on Spotify, I look like the little guy from like the Joker who rides around on his bike. That's literally how I feel. Because he has the, he has like the little chin. That's it. Not the Joker. Where did I get the Joker from? I'm sorry, guys. But basically, disclaimer, I got chin filler today and it feels like there is concrete in my chin. So if I look a bit weird, like the way I'm talking, or I feel like I'm not going to be able to laugh. So I'm just putting a disclaimer out there that I feel like that guy on the bike from Saw, and I feel like my face isn't moving normally.
It looks pretty good though.
I mean, I think it's a bit swollen at the moment. I don't know, but I was literally saying to Taz before we got on this call that having filler is like the first 3 days of having it is literally the worst thing ever. Literally just feels like concrete in your face and it is horrible. So right now I'm just not loving life and it's really tender. Like I find it really painful. So I'm not having a good time right now. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, and it's so funny because we were both coming on this podcast. We're not feeling like we look good enough for the podcast today because Liv's just got chin filler and I literally got my eyebrows laminated today. So I think my eyebrows look crazy because if you're a girl and you get your eyebrows tinted, you'll know that the first day you always look crazy because they're so dark. So I'm just giving a disclaimer for my eyebrows because I personally think they look crazy, but yeah,
I'm not taking any disclaimers from you, Taz, because you literally always look like a supermodel. Like literally always. Like that is just the word that I have for you. It's just supermodel. You just always look good.
You are a hypocrite then because I can't take anything from you.
No,
you always look perfect on every episode, and I'm just like rolling out of bed like, oh. We decided to do YouTube videos. It's kind of on us, really, but we could have just stuck to audio and been fine.
Yeah, we used to rock up like literally with just, oh my God. If you guys could see what we used to look like on the podcast, it was actually diabolical. It's probably for the best that we're now doing video because we actually have to like get our life together and like look half presentable.
The amount of times where I would turn up to record the podcast and be like deathly hungover with my hair like just like everywhere, makeup still left on from the night before. Like that is the dedication we're talking about for this podcast. Or there was times when I went out for drinks and then came back in
came back,
filmed the podcast.
I'm sure there was one episode, there was literally one episode where you were definitely drunk, like 100%. I can't remember what episode 100%. It was, but like you were definitely drunk.
I can't remember if it was one of my episodes either, but I still remember what I was wearing. But yeah, I was pretty drunk.
What an absolute mess. Anyway, with the disclaimer done of how we look and us just moaning and putting ourselves down, I think we should just shut up and move on to the science section of today's episode. And we are going to be discussing the origins of sex. And I'm so excited for this one. So let's get into it. Welcome to the So Cultured podcast, hosted by Liv and Taz, exploring the world of science and tech, unfiltered.
This season, we're diving into the origins and taking you on a thrilling journey through the breakthroughs and untold stories that shape today's biggest scientific fields.
And of course, every episode brings the same mix of fun, fresh perspectives, and gossip, aka laboratory. From lab scandals to workplace drama, nothing is off limits.
This is So Cultured Season 4, The Origins. Imagine a world where the most fundamental mystery of life, how new life begins, remains completely unsolved. A world where even the greatest minds in history, the geniuses who calculated the weight of the Earth or charted the movement of comets, were utterly baffled by one simple question. Where do babies come from? For thousands of years, humanity lived in this world, and today we've unraveled this mystery, but why have we evolved to reproduce in a way that requires both a male and a female? Why don't we simply just create clones of ourselves?
Oh my God, that's actually so interesting. Like, I've never thought about the concept, or like, I've never really thought about the idea that people at one moment in time, like, literally did not know how like biologically we were made. Like we just kind of like take all of these things for granted. I guess. So I'm actually really intrigued as to where humans or like early humans actually thought babies came from. So maybe like, can we start there? So talking about like what actually were the theories through time, and when like did we actually figure out like where babies come from?
Right, it's actually such a crazy concept, but until as recently as 1875, no one, not even the greatest minds in history, fully understood how human reproduction worked. So Isaac Newton didn't know, Leonardo da Vinci, he was clueless, Galileo, no. They knew sex between a man and a woman sometimes resulted in pregnancy, but how and why was actually a total mystery. So let's go back to 1492 in the centre of Milan, a time where Da Vinci is tirelessly working away on his famous works like The Vitruvian Man and The Last Supper. But in his spare time, he takes a deep interest in human anatomy and draws a number of sketches depicting the anatomy of sex between a man and a woman, as well as a fetus inside of a womb. And these very sketches provide an insight on what was known about sex by some of the greatest minds of this time. And spoiler, it was not scientifically accurate at all. So for starters, on the male, he drew two channels in the penis, one for urine and one for semen, which he believed connected to the spinal column and by default the brain. And this reflects the Greek idea that the sperm is a drop of the brain, which is kind of weird to think, isn't it?
Yeah, that is very weird.
Our guys just like losing their intelligence every time.
I
What?
mean, no comment. No comment.
Okay, so his depiction of the woman's body was equally imaginative. She actually lacked ovaries but featured a fictional tube connecting the uterus to the nipple, and this was also based on the ancient Greek belief that menstrual blood transformed into breast milk, which was an attempt to
What?
explain why pregnant women and new mothers don't menstruate, which also is kind of crazy.
I guess that actually kind of makes sense. Like, initially I was like, what the hell? But actually, yeah, maybe you can see how they came to that conclusion.
For sure. And he also said at this time, Leonardo da Vinci, that for someone to be able to study anatomy like accurately, it would have involved illegal exhuming of bodies through the use of grave diggers. And so obviously that was highly frowned upon. So it was very hard to study the anatomy of humans
Mm-hmm.
at this time.
That's so interesting. Well, to be honest, like I'm assuming back then religion kind of played a big part in it anyway. I'm surprised that you kind of didn't say like, the first theory or like idea came from religion, if that makes sense.
No, that's like actually completely true, because at this time in Europe, science and religion actually worked very much hand in hand, with scientists viewing that their work was a way to honor God's creation. And it was believed that only God could create life and that parents didn't create their children. And instead, God had created all life at the beginning of time, with every future human preformed and waiting to emerge in the year 100 or 1200 or 2024. So people that believed this were actually called preformationists.
That's really interesting. I've never heard of this.
Yeah, and then in 1677, Dutch microscopist Anthony van Leeuwenhoek and his wife made love. And in his words, immediately after ejaculation, before 6 beats of the pulse had intervened, he ran to his microscope with a sample of semen, and there Leeuwenhoek saw, in his own words, so great a number of living animalcules that sometimes more than 1,000 were moving about in an amount of the material the size of a grain of sand. And in that moment, he made a groundbreaking discovery: spermatozoa. For the next 2 centuries, debates raged between preformationists. Spermists believed that the homunculus, which is essentially a tiny preformed human, resided in the sperm, while ovists argued that it was in the egg. So Van Leeuwenhoek himself was firmly in the spermist camp, which is understandable because he discovered spermatozoa, but he observed sperm from around 30 species and he described the intricate structures he saw, claiming that they resembled veins, nerves, and arteries, which obviously they didn't, but To him, the movement of the spermatozoa was proof of life, and in the case of humans, proof of the human soul. And just 20 years later, 𝗾𝗾𝗁𝗃 famously illustrated a tiny human curled up inside a sperm cell, calling it petite l'enfant, which means little infant. And even the term spermatozoon literally means seed animal, which I thought was so interesting.
Yeah, that is.
Ovist philosopher Nicholas Malebranche took the idea further, suggesting that every embryo contained infinitely smaller embryos, almost like an infinite Russian doll, all originating from Adam and Eve.
That is so cool. How imaginative. Like, I wonder what kind of theory I would have come up with. I mean, actually, we spoke about before, like, I'm not very philosophical, so I'd probably just be like, yeah, fair. It's like, people just like, just spawn out of nowhere like video games.
Is what it
but
is.
That Russian doll analogy is really interesting. Like, how funny that they just thought there was just like loads of
I know,
like little babies inside each other. I don't get it, but it's funny.
Well, I thought that the depiction, the petite l'enfant image, it basically shows like a baby curled up inside of the head of the sperm, and that's genuinely like what they thought. And I was like, that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like, if you knew nothing, like I said, we're kind of taking it for granted that now we know how it actually works, but like these are plausible theories to them at the time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also, like, you've just mentioned the human soul and stuff, and I'm trying not to laugh, but because I don't want to be like disrespectful, but I assume there was probably a lot of people had problems with the idea that spermatozoa hold the human soul, right? If you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. The main question against spermists was, why would nature or God allow so many seed animals to be wasted? And in fact, for over 100 years, until the mid-1800s, Europe was swept up in a wave of anti-masturbation hysteria. Physicians and moralists alike warned of dire consequences for those who indulged in the quote-unquote vile habit. And one particularly influential doctor even wrote a best-selling book describing the potential horrors of this very habit. And in it, he recounted the tragic case of a 17-year-old watchmaker whose life had been ruined by masturbation. The boy was bedridden, pale, and emaciated, and described as more like a corpse than a human being. And within weeks, the young man actually succumbed to his alleged affliction. And the message was clear and relentless. Every drop of semen was sacred and vital to life. Medical authorities at the time equated its loss with physical and moral disaster, which just mad.
That's kind of crazy. Like, imagine like you're actually dying of like some horrific disease, like you've got like the flu, or you've got like some horrible disease, and they're just like, yeah, do you know what, like, you're masturbating too much. You were just like, no, I'm actually dying.
Exactly. Because that's what I was thinking when I was reading this, because they described like he was like foaming at the mouth and stuff, and I was just like,
yeah, like, he's got rabies or something.
Hasn't just got rabies. And it's being blamed on the fact that he indulged in masturbating too much. Imagine if we said that to children these days, like, if you do this will happen to you.
Oh, that's funny. But how did they make that connection? Do you know what I mean? That's what I'm interested in. Like, oh, I don't know, this guy comes into you're a doctor. He comes into your doctor's surgery. He's really ill. And how did he even get to the point where he knows that he's been masturbating? Like, oh yeah, I've got a high fever. Oh, can you think of anything that triggered this? Oh, I masturbated the other day. Like, where did that connection come from? That's interesting.
Well, my thoughts is that he's a 17-year-old boy. So I'm like, maybe he did indulge. But like, and then that was just taken as gospel. That was the reason why he was sick. But also, like, you got to think around the time they're like trying to create this idea that masturbation is bad and every drop of semen is like vital and God's creation. So in a way, you've also got to take it with a pinch of salt, because there will be some kind of like bias and propaganda to the stuff that was wrote at that time, depending on their religion or, because a lot of the philosophers were actually priests as well. And that brings me on nicely to a philosopher and priest called Lazzaro Spallanzani. And he was an ovist, which means he believed that the egg was the sole responsibility for creating human life. But he wanted to test his own theory, so he designed a really unusual experiment with frogs. In this experiment, he mixed male and female frogs, but with a bit of a twist. So some male frogs were dressed in tight 𝗃𝘃𝗃 or satin pants, literally like little shorts on these frogs. And despite their best efforts, the panted frogs failed to become parents to any tadpoles, while the control group of undressed frogs successfully produced tadpoles. And despite Spallanzani's initial beliefs of being an ovist, this experiment actually proved that sperm were essential for reproduction, refuting the idea of spontaneous generation from either the sperm or the egg. So while Spallanzani's frog pants actually seem quite comical today, his work actually laid the foundation for modern reproductive biology. And today in Scandiano, Italy, there's even a statue that honors Spallanzani, and he holds a frog, but unfortunately the frog does not have pants, which I think they missed a massive opportunity there.
Oh my god, I love that. So like, how did we go from all of these like crazy wild theories to like our understanding of sex today, I guess?
Yeah, obviously we didn't make much headway on finding out where babies came from until the 19th century. So science started cracking the code on reproduction in a really big way. And in 1927, Carl Ernst von Bauer discovered the mammalian egg in the ovary. And this was completely contradictory again to the pre-formationist ideology, as he even proposed how embryos grow. And he believed that embryos start as simple structures and grow into more complex, specialized forms. And then in 1876, a German scientist named Oskar Hertwig took things a step further. He figured out that fertilization happens when a sperm and an egg fuse, and Hertwig is credited as the first person to observe sexual reproduction at the cellular level by looking at the cells of sea urchins under the microscope. Then came the 20th century, where molecular biology was really starting to advance, and scientists began unraveling the mysteries of DNA and genetics, and by early 1900s they connected chromosomes to hereditary, and eventually DNA was identified as the blueprint of life. And this set stage for some incredible breakthroughs like in vitro fertilization or IVF, which became a reality in the late 1970s. And the birth of the first test tube baby was a huge milestone that showed just how far we'd come in understanding and even assisting reproduction.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I feel like we spoke about this so much in the 𝗃𝘃𝗃𝗁 episode, like in the last episode of season 3, and that was so interesting. But I suppose like all of this really must have changed human perspective on sex.
Yeah, exactly. It really did. And conversations around sex education were obviously introduced, and family planning became more mainstream. And obviously today people can make way more informed decisions over sex and having children than they ever could before, because we just know more.
Yeah, 100%. Especially with like contraception and family planning and stuff like that. I mean, I'm actually like, this is a whole topic that we could get into on an episode, but I am like so against female contraception. Like I think we've spoke about this before, like you and me, like off the podcast, but I am so against like using contraception. Like I will never touch female contraception unless I feel like I need to for a medical reason, but like for the pure purpose of not getting pregnant, like I'm not doing it. I'm literally not doing it.
Yeah,
but that is a whole
I 100% agree, because I'm just like, it's surely not healthy to like give yourself artificial hormones. And there's alternatives available. There's condoms, you know,
exactly.
Like, and I just think, I honestly, this might be really controversial, but I really think the dialogue around condoms is really damaging, because whenever I mention condoms, like girls and guys, I would say predominantly girls as well, but that's probably because I'm having conversations with them more about it, obviously, are like, oh no, like I hate condoms, like they don't feel right, they don't feel the same, all this. And I'm like, okay, but that, I feel like that's quite immature view.
Do you know what doesn't feel right? Is having your hormones messed up, not having a period for like 6 years, which literally is what happened to me when I was on the implant for 6 years. I literally didn't have a period. That doesn't feel right. So like, I quite frankly don't really care if you don't think it feels right for like what you're gonna last like 3 minutes anyway. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not putting myself through 6 years of like messing up my hormones again so you feel a little bit better in like the however long we're having sex for. No, not doing it.
Yeah, but honestly, it wasn't even from like a male perspective. Like, I hadn't even touched on that. It was more like girls that I spoke to who were clearly having issues with their hormonal contraception, and me just giving my sort of 2 pence of, I don't think, like, it's not good for you, for like anecdotal evidence, which isn't really evidence, but like the pill made me so depressed. And when I tell you, like, when you're in that depressive state, you don't you can't physically put 2 and 2 together. Like, your brain doesn't work like that. It's not like you've taken a pill and you immediately become like really depressed. It's like, it's gradual, so subtle that you don't notice, and then you're literally in the depths of like feeling really depressed. And then I stopped it, and it was honestly like a whole weight lifted off my shoulder, because I just stopped taking it. I still I didn't believe it for a long, like I wasn't 100% sure it was the pill, and then I went back on it, and then it made me feel really depressed again. And I was like, this is so bad, because I'm lucky that I put 2 and 2 together, but there's probably a lot of people out there that didn't, that haven't, and are feeling like the same way that I was. Like, I don't think I'm going to be alone in that side effect. So yeah, I just think it's mad. And yeah, it definitely messed up my cycle. Like, I don't think I had a period for like 4 months after coming off of the pill, which is just not right, surely.
Insane. Yeah, no, it's just insane. I mean, I understand like contraception and like the pill can be good. It actually can be beneficial for some people. For example, for like PCOS, like it actually is helpful. But I think like there should just be more openness to women, or like there should just be more women who are just feel okay to just say, no, I don't want to be on it. And like, that's okay. But we need to do a whole episode on this, because I actually could talk about this all day. Because
I know, I honestly get so passionate about it.
But anyway, for the sake of sticking to time on today's episode, so now we've kind of covered like the human perspective of sex throughout time. So like how humans have viewed sex, I guess. Can we talk a little bit about like what do we know about where sex actually originated from?
Yeah, exactly. So we know that birds do it, and so do bees, so the birds and the bees, but so do 99.99% of eukaryotes, at least on occasion. And there are a number of theories of why sexual reproduction arose. After all, like I said earlier, it surely would just be easier to make clones of ourselves. So let's take it right back to the start. So in the eukaryotic fossil record, sexual reproduction first appeared about 2 billion years ago, and for context, the Earth itself is about 4.6 billion years old. And all sexually reproducing eukaryotic organisms likely derive from a single common ancestor, and it's likely that the evolution of sex was actually an integral part of the evolution of the first eukaryotic cell. And there are a number of theories about this and how it came about, but I'm going to touch on my favorite, which is called the viral eukaryogenesis theory. Big words.
Obviously.
So the first eukaryotic cell capable of meiosis is hypothesized to have arisen due to the merging of 3 organisms. So the first organism was a lysogenic virus, which is a virus that integrates into the host's DNA. The second was like an archaeon, which is a primitive single-celled organism. And then the third, a bacterium, which is another type of single-celled organism. And basically, it's thought that the virus integrated into the host archaeon's DNA, becoming its information center, like the nucleus in modern day eukaryotic cells. And then over time, the archaeon passed many of its genes to the virus center, but kept processes like protein synthesis and metabolism, whilst the bacterium that integrated actually eventually became the mitochondrion, the powerhouse of the cell. And that leads me to the first hypothesis, the mitochondria hypothesis. So the mitochondria eventually became critical for producing energy using oxygen. But if you know anything about oxygen, you know that it's highly reactive and can form reactive oxygen species, or ROS for short, during cellular respiration, which obviously leads to like energy or ATP for the cell. And that ROS can damage DNA, membranes, and proteins. And as a result, sexual reproduction might have evolved as a sort of protective measure against this damage, because you can combine two genomes in offspring, which means organisms have a backup copy of its DNA. And also, damaged DNA can be repaired using the healthy version from the other parent, increasing resilience against oxidative stress or like DNA mutations.
Oh, that's so cool. That's like a much more sophisticated explanation than what I was expecting. Like, I don't know what I was expecting, but that's so cool. But obviously all of that is like very much at a cellular level almost.
Yeah.
So are there any like other hypotheses? Like, surely it must have like an evolutionary advantage, right?
Yeah, 100%. So it's important to note that all of these hypotheses could have all been true and happened in combination, or one might have been true, one might not have been. So it's not that they're all kind of independent of one another, but they kind of like form the basis for like theories for the origin of sexual reproduction. But the second hypothesis is the genetic variation advantage. So while asexual reproduction is literally the production of a complete copy of itself or a clone, sexual reproduction shuffles genetic material, creating new combinations of alleles, which are different gene variants. While mutations generate new alleles, sexual reproduction amplifies diversity by mixing and matching them, like shuffling a deck of cards, basically. So some combinations might give organisms an edge in changing environments. And as we know, this rapid increase in genetic diversity can also help adapt to challenges like diseases or climate changes. And what we've seen is where an organism can reproduce both sexually and asexually, we see these organisms switch to one or another due to the environment they're in. So when everything is going well and an organism is well suited to its environment, asexual reproduction makes sense because it's efficient and it preserves the successful genetic combinations that are currently working in that environment. But under stress, sexual reproduction becomes more beneficial because it allows less fit individuals to shuffle their genes and produce offspring with new genetic combinations. And so that then might result in traits better suited to overcoming the challenges in their current environment. And lastly, similar to the genetic variation advantage, sexual reproduction also allows for eradication of undesirable traits that may hinder population growth of a particular organism. So basically leads to like a constant leveling up or constant adaptation to a changing environment.
That is really interesting and just made me think about, for example, like organisms that have like asexual reproduction, like typically they're plants, right? And I think that's interesting because they're more likely to not be exposed to different environments, really, because, you know what I mean? Like they can't move. Whereas organisms that have like sexual reproduction move a lot. So maybe they had a stronger evolutionary pressures towards sexual reproduction for that reason. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Maybe
that's
that's a really
true.
dumb thing to say, but I know, or just like really obvious. But it's just interesting because I just never really thought about like why plants, for example, have like asexual and then humans have sexual reproduction. That's really interesting.
I didn't really think about it either before, because when I was doing the research going into this, obviously I knew that sexual reproduction leads to like genetic variation and being able to adapt to your environment. But I was very much of the mindset of surely it would just be easier to like create tons of clones of yourself if it's like, you don't need another being to be involved in reproducing. So it's like more energy efficient. Surely it would happen easier, you know?
We don't need any more living Tazes running around this world.
Oh, I don't know. I think we need a female. No, I'm joking. Absolutely not.
I mean, there is already another one of me, so.
Oh, yeah, true. It's so funny because at the So Cultured event that we did as well, obviously your sister came and me and Yaz just posed with your sister because we couldn't find you. So we were like, oh, we'll just pose with your sister and it will be fine.
I did wonder that when I looked in the shared album that like us three have, and I just saw pictures of you guys with Grace, and I was like, what is happening? Like, what are they doing?
We'd had like
So
one
funny.
too many mojitos and we were like, it'll be fine. We need to get content.
It was so obvious it's not me. Like, I think we look really different.
Yeah,
Like,
you're very
obviously, I know we look
different,
similar,
like,
but we are
yeah.
very different. But
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, back to the episode. I think now at this point of the episode, we would like typically go into talking about what we now know about sexual reproduction, and I guess like
Yeah.
the things that we can do, or like how science has advanced. But I feel like and I've already mentioned this episode, but I feel like we covered it so well in our last season in the 𝗾𝘂𝗃𝗀𝗯𝗯𝗃 episode, where we talk about like genetically engineered babies and IVF and things like that. So I think if any of the listeners are interested in hearing more about that, then that is season 3 episode 8. So definitely go and listen to that if you want to learn more about that. But I think that rounds off the science for today's episode, and that was so interesting, Taz. Like, I actually feel like this is one of them episodes where you covered all of the questions that I had in my brain like prior to us filming this episode. So I really, really enjoyed it. It was so good.
And obviously, as we say in every single episode, if you want to learn more about this subject, there should be links in our description. But for now, we are going on to our laboratory, where we have a listen story for you guys.
I'll slip into your dreams tonight. Oh, so give me your
Okay, let's get straight into the email. So it says, I am in love with my lab partner, but there's a catch. Okay, so it says, all right, buckle up because this is a wild one. Also, can I just say, I love how our listeners are like picking up on our lingo, because I feel like Yaz started us off by saying wild, and like now we're like, oh, that's wild, wild, wild. And now our listeners are saying it's just cracking me up. Okay. All right. Buckle up because this is a wild one. I am in my final year and part of a research project where we're paired up in teams of 2. My lab partner, let's call him Gavin, is extremely charismatic, and honestly, he's one of the smartest people in our program. We clicked instantly, not just in the lab, but also over coffee, inside jokes, late night study sessions, you name it. Now here is where it gets interesting. Gavin has a long time girlfriend. Everyone in the department knows about her and they've been together for years. But as we started spending more time together on this project, things got a little ... complicated. He would be extra complimentary, give me these lingering looks, and even joke about us being the perfect lab match. At first, I thought it was harmless chemistry, in brackets, pun intended. Kind of love that. But then he started suggesting we work in more private spots, like the storage room at the back of the lab, or after hours when no one was around. One evening, we were both exhausted after an all-day experiment, and he offered to drive me home. On the way home, he opened up about his relationship, saying things had been rocky and that he felt like his girlfriend didn't get him the way I did. He was looking at me with those intense eyes, and let's just say I started feeling the spark. I felt like I was in a movie, lol. But the scandal really started the next week. One of our lab mates overheard a conversation between us and began spreading rumours that Gavin and I were a thing. Now the whole department has his eyes on us. His girlfriend even came to the lab once and was giving me death stares and acting super possessive around him. It's been tense. People are constantly whispering. Our supervisor keeps giving us strange looks, and I can't help but wonder if it's just the chemistry of our project or if there's something more between us. That's a lot.
Oh my god, that is a lot. I don't even know where to start with that.
So basically she's saying that she likes Gavin, but she doesn't know if it's just the fact that they're like doing the project together and they've like got a bit close over the project, or if there is actually something between them.
Yeah. And it seems like there was something between
Yeah.
them, and then they started getting found out, and then they were like, no.
Well, basically, Gavin was like into you until his girlfriend found out, and then started like being all possessive around him, and then all of a sudden he's backed off.
This is a tough one.
I think Gavin likes her, to be honest, because she says that he's like flirting. Right, first of all, he asked her to go into the storage room or stay in the lab after hours. What are you doing in the storage room, please? Like, why do you want to go in the storage room?
Yeah, or the dark room.
Yeah, oh gosh. Or after hours, like he obviously wants like no one else, like, or not many people at least, to be around to not like overhear their conversation. So like for me, that's like he obviously fancies you 100%.
Yeah,
what I mean?
100%. Yeah.
And then to be like, oh,
100%.
me and my girlfriend, like we're in a rocky position, and
Yeah.
like he definitely, he's trying to cheat on
That's
her, on his girlfriend
unquestionable,
with
I
her.
think. I think he definitely likes her. He definitely has a crush on her.
Uh-huh.
And like, I guess she has a crush back, right? So the feeling is mutual. But
Yeah.
obviously it's complicated because he is in a relationship.
Can I just make a comment on the departmental thing though? Because she's saying like, oh, people in the department are giving them like weird looks, and the supervisor's giving them weird looks. Like, first of all, like who the cares? Like, do you know what I mean? I feel like people in departments like date all the time. Like, it's not even that big of a deal. So like, let's not worry about the people in the department watching you or like looking at you, because honestly, who actually cares? But I think the bigger problem is the fact that he has a girlfriend, and then like now his girlfriend's like in the lab. First of all, why are you bringing your girlfriend in the lab? Like, I just can't imagine that being a thing. Like, that's weird. I don't know, like what should she do? I mean, I feel like it's kind of out of her hands, right? Like it's all in Gavin's hands. Like unless Gavin breaks up with his girlfriend, and then you guys can then pursue something. Until then, I feel like this is out of your control.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think you're allowed to like have a lab crush, and that's fine. And you're not technically doing anything wrong by having a crush on
nothing.
him, but he really should not be entertaining it with you if he thinks that he's going to carry on like in his relationship with this other girl, because not only is he stringing you along because nothing's going to happen from it, but also he's kind of cheating by flirting with someone else and making them think that something is going to happen, you know?
Yeah, no, that's actually so true. And it's kind of given like fuckboy vibes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it really is giving boy bar. Like, I don't know why we kind of sat here on our like moral high ground, right? Like, you can't ever tell me you've never been like, I don't know, had a crush on someone.
Had a crush on someone that you shouldn't. Yeah, we've all been there. So like, I really was going to start slagging this guy off and be like, oh my God, but I think you're right. I think we've all been there. But anyway, we're not actually here to judge Gavin anyway. That's actually not what we're here for. Do you know what I mean? So like,
No.
let's just stop that conversation right there. But actually what we need to do is advise our listener. What should she do? Should she, because at the end of her email, she kind of hinted at the fact that like, should she try and pursue something with him, or should she just like dead it and like accept that it's just like a lab kind of thing? I feel like we need to think bigger. We need to think bigger outside of the lab, literally. Like, do we like Gavin for other reasons? Like, do you and Gavin have anything in common? Do you actually feel like you talk about anything other than the fact that he's not getting on with his girlfriend, anything other than the fact that you guys are doing this project together? Because if you answered no to those, then it probably is just a lab romance, in which case maybe just enjoy your lab romance, and then when it's over, it's over. But if you feel like you've really got so many things in common, you're really getting on, and you genuinely feel like it could be something, then maybe you could just have an open conversation with Gavin and just be like, look, hey, I know you've got a girlfriend, but like, I would straight up just be like, you've obviously been flirting with me, so like, what's the sitch? That's what I would say.
Yeah, that's really true, to be fair, because part of me was like, oh, don't get involved. But then you make a really valid point. Like, you could just, that's not really your problem. You could just straight up ask him, like, what's the sitch? Because I feel like this conversation has been this kind of way, and I really feel like I have a lot in common with you, and we get on really well. And then just see where he's at, because if he turns around and he's like, nah, I've got a girlfriend, not happening, then
because also,
you know
how like some people think that you're flirting with them when you're not. Do you know what I mean? Because like, you know how some people just have a flirty personality, and then some people don't. So like, maybe he just has actually no, because then he was saying about how him and his girlfriend are rocky and they're the perfect lab match. I feel like he is. I think he's definitely flirting, so we just got to ask him, what's the sitch?
But I'm going to play devil's advocate right here, you know, and say, should you where you eat? AKA, should you have a relationship at work?
Good
Because
point.
that is intense, I think.
I've been there, done that, and I don't recommend, actually. I really don't recommend.
Yeah, not many people do.
You know how people have like their work husband, their work wife, like he could just be your work husband and you could just leave it at that. And like, you know how some people say you should never pursue that because then you ruin it. Do you know what I mean? And like once you fucked one, no, not literally, once you fucked it up is what I meant to say. Cool, I feel like that was a Freudian slip and a half. once you've fucked it up with one work husband, you can't have another. Do you know what I mean? I feel like you get one work husband and that's it. So like, also, let's think about this. Like, do you want to get rid of your work husband?
No, work husbands are great.
I don't have one. Do you have one?
Well, I had a work husband during my PhD. He's basically my
even I know
PhD
him.
bestie. Yeah,
even
great
I know
guy.
him.
He came to our little So Cultured podcast
Did he?
event. Yeah, he came.
Oh my god, I feel like I didn't meet him because he was Sam, right?
He was the one who guessed 0 pipettes in a jar. Because there was technically no pipettes in a jar, it was pipette tips. And he was like, did I win? And I was like, well,
he should have.
You were literally right, but...
He should have. Oh, bless him.
Sorry, Sam, if you're listening.
But yeah, I mean, you wouldn't want to lose your work husband.
Nah, and we were like emotionally supported each other through that PhD, and I would never want to taint that. So yeah, I feel like the same extends to a work husband.
Yeah, 100%. So my final bit of advice is, I was about to say don't go there, but I'm sorry, I'm encouraging it. Go there. That's what I'm gonna say. I'm gonna say go there. Go and confront him and be like, look, I think you're really sexy. I think you think I'm sexy. Ooh. What's the deal here? That's what I would do. Final bit of advice.
Yeah, I do agree in that respect. Like, you need more clarification. And also, I always feel like with these listener stories, we don't usually grasp the whole scenario. So if it's a case where like you're technically not working with him, it's like just uni vibes, or like you're not going to work with him for an extended period of time, or like something like that. I feel like relationship at work is a lot. But yeah, I agree. You need more clarification. I think you should put all your cards on the table and you'll get the answer.
What have you got to lose?
Like whether you like it or not, like he'll either say, I don't want to lose this, and yeah, I like you too, or he'll be like, no, sorry, I've got a girlfriend, and then you'll know where you stand.
Then you know where you stand. So you've literally got nothing to lose. I love this. So, you know, go lay your cards out on the table, like Taz says. Come back, give us the update. What's the situation with you and Gavin? And like we said last week, I'm just going to end this by saying all Gavins are up. Every Gavin we've had.
Sorry, Gavin, if you're listening.
Being a bit of a boy or horrible in some way. So maybe one of the listeners should write in with a nice Gavin story. Do you know what I mean? Like, we need a nice Gavin story. So if you're someone who feels like you have a nice Gavin story that you want to share with us, then don't forget that you can use the anonymous link in today's episode description, or if you're watching on YouTube, it will be in today's video description. With that rounds up episode 5 of So Cultured Podcast. So we will see you guys in next week's episode, where we are going to be delving into the origins of life / the origins of DNA. So we will see you guys in next week's episode. Bye everyone.
Bye.